with parting gifts. I'm going to be home with parting gifts. Thank you so much. All right. Let's get down to business now. The book of St. John, chapter 15, for our reading today. St. John, chapter 15. And I'm mindful of the time. And I would like to let you out earlier than it says on the brochure. So I hope everybody at the kitchen's ready for us when we get out early, if we do. You know, whenever the plane takes off, I always know what the destination is, but I don't know how many stops I'm making on the way to the destination. And I have been known to land the plane before I got to the destination. So I've got some things in mind, but I really don't have much to tell you. I just got this page, just half a page right here is all I got. So don't be discouraged. Sometimes I come to the pulpit with 10 pages, and usually I don't tell when I do that. St. John 15, I want to begin today with verse 15. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever ye shall ask of my Father in my name, he may give it you. These things I command you, that you love one another. If the world hate you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. And I want to use this for a thought today. Yes, it's still day. Henceforth I call you not servants. I have chosen you. Heavenly Father, the task that's before us this morning is large, but we depend upon you to come and help us. And we ask that you'll guide our thoughts as we go through this today. In Jesus' name, amen. What's going on here? That's always a good thing to know. Who's doing the speaking? We know it's Jesus. It's in red letters. So we know Jesus is doing the speaking. Who's he speaking to? The answer is the disciples. On what occasion? On their way to the Garden of Gethsemane. So that's the occasion. Jesus speaking to his disciples on the way to the Garden of Gethsemane. He tells them here, I'm no longer going to call you servants, because the servant doesn't know what his Lord is doing. But I want to call you friends from here on. I want to call you friends, and I think the very best translation of that probably is partners. I want to call you partners. This business of being a servant or a partner, I want to kind of illustrate just a little bit briefly if I can. When I graduated from high school, immediately after that, it was midterm. Back then you could graduate midterm, and I did have enough credits to graduate midterm. So that was in January of 77. And we had a real cold streak that year. We had 31 days in Indiana below zero, I believe, in 77. 78 was the great blizzard. And this little deal that you guys had here recently, it's not even in the running. We had drifts that were as high as the peak of this roof in some places in the wide open spaces out there. They brought half tracks and bulldozers in to clear my road. I was stranded at work and didn't get home for 2 complete weeks during that and after that blizzard. It was awful. But in 77, a bunch of my friends had pickup trucks, and they were driving back and forth across the Ohio River. That's how thick the ice was in those days. A very cold thing. So when I graduated from high school, I went to work at Hertz Shoe Store. It's a 100-and-some-year-old concern. It's still going on now. And I learned how to be a shoe salesman. Now, you didn't just go in and grab stuff off the rack like you do now. They didn't, everything wasn't like just 2 sizes. Here it's big and wide or big and wide. That's pretty much your choice on shoes. I just feel like most of the time I'm wearing boxes on my feet. I draw them together as close as I can. My real size is 10.5A. Well, in those days, we had all the sizes from AAA being the smallest and most narrow, all the way to the big wide ones, triple E's. You had everything all in between, so you had like 10 sizes for every size, widths. And so you just didn't go in and grab your stuff out of your box. In fact, the merchandise wasn't even on the floor. It was behind the wall. And there was a sample shoe out in front, and we would wait on people. And you'd come in and sit down. I'd take your shoe off of you, and then your foot would be put on this measuring thing, and I'd figure out how wide your foot was, have you stand, and find out, your feet are fatter when you stand up. You knew that. And I'd have you stand, and I'd find out how wide your shoe was and what you needed. And I'd say, well, what are you looking for today? Well, dress shoes, work shoes, this, that. And then I'd go back, what color you got in mind, and so on. And this was really easy pretty much for the men. And the men would come in, I want a pair of wingtips. I want them in black. And I already know my size, and I would pretty much run with that. If a guy came in and says he already knew his size, I'd roll with that. If a woman came in and told me that, no. Yeah. So this is what I would do. I sold shoes all day long, or hang them up at the big old-fashioned cash register. It was really not ever so much smaller than this pulpit here. Had a great big crank on one end of it, and you would crank it, and it would ring bells. It had 6 drawers in the back of it, and each of us salesmen had our own drawer. So we made change out of our own drawer. And when the bell rang, everybody in the store that also worked there knew that you'd made a sale. Our cash register went up to $99.99. So the only thing we had in the store that was over $100 was Florsheim Imperial Wing shoes, Imperial Wing tips. They were $119 back then. And that was a lot of money. It's like taking out a loan for a car now. And so you'd ring twice, 2 rings. So everybody in the store that worked there also knew you'd made a big sale, 2 rings on the big cash register. And I would go in early. I'd sweep, dust, do all kinds of things, clean, do various things. And I would walk the bank bag down to the bank under the watchful eye of the owner. On Friday evening, I'd draw my pay. I made $77 a week. They paid me in cash on Friday night. It was always a great time. But not one time did the owner ever say to me, Rollin, come back and I want to show you how much money we got in the bank. When the salesmen came around, we called them drummers because they were going around drumming up business. They would pull up in these big 9-passenger station wagons, some of them like Woody station wagons. And they had these huge, humongous cases inside full of sample shoes. So the drummers would pull up out in front, and of course they had come in and they knew the owner. They'd been there so many times. And the owner would say, Rollin, go out and bring their cases in. So I'd take a 2-wheeler and go out and bring all those big heavy cases in. They'd start opening them up, and the owner would go through, and he'd flex those shoes. He'd ask all kinds of questions, and before the thing was over, the drummers would take the owner out for lunch, and I'd be told, load the car. I never got asked, Rollin, what do you think we ought? Do you think we should carry this shoe? Do you think that this will be a good shoe for us to carry? After all, I was the one that did all the selling. I should have been asked, but I wasn't. I never got asked anything important. I just had a job to do because, you see, I was a servant. That was it. I was a servant. Years rolled by, and now I'm a pastor, evangelizing some, usually about 11 weeks a year. While I pastored, I didn't want to be gone from home too much. But I would do that. And I remember landing in at this church, and there was this dear old saint that attended there. She was an old retired preacher. And she had no children, and she had no really close relatives that, pardon me, Mr. Who, gave a hoot about her. And so she came to me once, and she said, Dr. Mitchell. Well, she always called me that before it even was. And she said, I've got some business I want to talk to you about. Come to my house this week. What day can you come? So we made an appointment. I went over and she said, really, I don't have anybody to take care of business for me if something would happen to me and I would get to the point that I couldn't handle my own business. She said, would you be interested in doing that for me? I said, yeah, I will do that. I was young, dumb. And I said, yeah, I'll be interested in that. So she said, well, I'll have my attorney give you a call, da-da-da-da. So the attorney calls me. I'll go down. He slides a paper across. I sign it. He slides another paper across. I sign it. Slides another paper across. I sign it. He gave me copies of them. I put them in my pocket. I don't know what happened to them. I don't think I ever saw them again. And then, several years went by again. I was no longer pastoring that church. I was out in evangelism now 46 weeks a year. And I did that for 12 years at that point. And so I was gone all the time. But one Monday while I was home, my phone rang. And it was a lady at the hospital. And she said, Mrs. So-and-so's in the hospital. Do you remember her? I said, oh, yes, I do. She said, did you remember that you're her power of attorney and healthcare representative? And I said, well, no, I'd forgot about that. In fact, I didn't know, really. I hadn't read the papers. And she said, well, it's time for you to begin to function. She has Alzheimer's, and she doesn't know where she is or what she's doing, and she's being dismissed from the hospital tomorrow or the next day, and you need to get busy, and you need to contact her attorney and find out what in the world you're going to do. Oh, my goodness. I was just home for a day and a half. I didn't have time for this. But you see, we were friends. I was her partner, and I had been called into service. I went straight to that attorney's office. I said, what in the world is going on? He said, let me tell you what's going on, buddy. He said, you remember signing this? I said, yes, I do. He said, well, beginning today, you're in charge of all of her finances. And he pulled out checkbooks and keys and deeds and all kind of stuff and just handed it to me. And I was overwhelmed. And he said, from now on, you're in complete charge of her business. He said, Rollin Mitchell, I want you to do her business just like she would. I want you to do it just like she would do it. That's what your job is. He said, you'll need to go first and pick out a nursing home for her. She's being dismissed on Friday. And you'll need to go pick her up from the hospital Friday and take her there yourself. And you'll need to go to her house between now and then and get her clothes. So I did. All the above. I went and picked out a nice nursing home for her. And I went to her house, rummaged through her drawers and stuff. My wife was along. I didn't know what to pick out. We boxed up a bunch of stuff. And Deborah says, well, I'm not going with you to take her to the nursing home. I'm not going. Because we thought she might cry. We thought she might beg not to go. That she might beg me to come home with me. What would I do then? I didn't know. So I got to the hospital, and when I came in, she said, oh, Dr. Mitchell. She knew me. What a pleasant surprise. I said, I've got a surprise for you. I said, I'm going to take you on a little trip. Oh, she said, I'm going to love that. I'm going to love that. And she just brightened right up. And she was a woman of God. A few months before that, she had been in the hospital, and they called me and they said, your friend's in the hospital and she's calling for you. And I went over and they said, she's dying. And I said, okay. And that was before I even remembered I was her, all this other stuff. I was just her. I was her friend, quote unquote. And they said, well, don't raise your voice because she's dying and she's called your name a time or two and we've called you here. And so I went in And I said, Sister Browning, it's Brother Mitchell. She said, Dr. Mitchell. I said, well, I'm going to pray for you. I was whispering. They told me not to be loud. So I started praying for her. And I said, well, dear Lord, it looks like Sister Browning's about ready to go to heaven. She reared up out of that bed. She held her arm up the way she used to do when she preached. She said, what will it be when we get over yonder? She didn't die. Not for a long time. So anyway, I hauled her to the nursing home. We pulled up in front of the nursing home, and she says, oh, what a surprise. I thought, man, this is the easiest I've ever heard of anybody going in the nursing home. Usually you have to drag them screaming and kicking, I'm going to tell you. So she said, oh, back here again after all these years. Back here, this blessed old camp that I love so well. She thought she was at Orleans Wesleyan Campground. I didn't tell her she wasn't. Because I had been told by professionals, you don't argue with these people. It doesn't do any good. You can tell them the same thing over and 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 over again, and it doesn't do any good to argue with them. Just let them think what they will, and just don't argue with them. So I thought, well, okay, we're at Orleans, okay? And we got into her room, and she said, oh, to be back in our own little cottage again. She said, you did surprise me, Dr. Mitchell. Oh. She told me to put her clothes in the closet out in the hall. There was no such closet. But you know, this was God's way of letting her be happy in her old age. I went in one day and she had a sore throat. She was real raspy. So I said, are you sick? She said, no. She said, I lost my voice preaching in the youth service this morning. So I went out to the desk and of course there, they called me Dr. Mitchell too, because she called me that, and they thought I was an MD. And they said, Dr. Mitchell, your mother. I said, did Sister Browning preach here this morning? Oh, she said, yes, she did. Yes, she did. She preached for 45 minutes. She was a great lady. Oh, I learned all about her finances. I had her checkbook, and the attorney told me how to make it out. It said her name, and then it said Rollin Mitchell, POA, and all this, and my name was on her. I signed the checks and so on, and I would go in, and then I showed her the checkbook. She said, "This is our checkbook, isn't it?" I said, "This is our checkbook." She said, "Have we got any money?" I said, "We do." And I turned it over there. Oh, the figures were staggering. She was a person that had accumulated some stuff. I didn't know. I thought she was a poor little thing and didn't hardly have anything. Not so. She had scrimped around and saved, and her husband had saved, and they had money I didn't know anything about. But when I became her partner, I found out all this stuff concerning her business. And so I just pulled the checkbook out. I took it every time I went, and I'd show her the bottom line. She said, "We're rich as pigs." And this is how it would go. Every time I was home from a meeting, I'd run over and see her. I had to mow her yard at her house. The house is still going on. I'm paying the bills over there. I'm mowing the grass over there. I'm taking care of business over there, trimming her shrubs when I didn't trim my own. I mean, it's a big business I'm in here. This is no small thing that I've signed up for. Telling you, finally the attorney says, "Well, do you think she's ever going to go home?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, then we need to have a sale and sell off her personal things so we can rent the house and help pay on the bills over there at the nursing home." So I said, "Okay, I'll call an auctioneer." He says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. Read page 3. Page 3 says, I do not want strangers stomping all over my property and selling my stuff. I want Dr. Mitchell to sell my stuff. So I had to cancel a revival. That could have been the one I canceled of yours. I don't know. I had to cancel a revival and have her sell. And I did. And then I put the house up for rent, interviewed all kinds of renters, thought I was choosing a great one, chose a bad one, didn't pay the rent. I'm on their porch every month begging them to pay their rent. And I mean, the place got to they weren't mowing the grass. They agreed to mow. I had to mow. Let's fast forward. It's just too much. I'm overwhelmed. Sooner or later, she did get very ill. I'd hauled her all over town in her wheelchair. I'd go over there and pick her up at the nursing home, just take her walking all over town. I tell you, one time it was so hot, I wished I had never got her out of that nursing home, but I was 10 blocks away. And I finally just fell down on the grass under a big tree. I was exhausted and hot. She looked down at me, I'm laying in the grass. She says, Dr. Mitchell, we're having a wonderful time, aren't we? Finally, she did pass away. And so I got all of her stuff together. By that time, I had also sold her house, and that was a big rigmarole too. And oh my, I can't tell you, this went on for years, guys. I'm telling you, went on for years. But I had agreed to be her partner, and I was going to do it. I took all the stuff, piled it on the attorney's front counter. Oh. My job as power of attorney had ended. And the lawyer came out and he says, whoa, what's all this plunder? And I said, well, I'm bringing all this stuff back because my, is over. And, oh, he said, just a minute. You need to come back to my office. He pushed another paper. Do you remember signing that? Oh, yeah, well, I don't know. He says, well, congratulations. You're the executor of her estate. He said, she's chosen a good man for this job, and that's you. Now I had to finalize everything, and it was going to take a long time, too. There was a lot to do, and she was leaving her estate to different people, GBS, UBC, Church of the Bible Covenant, ICHA Missions, I don't know. He said, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is she didn't leave you a cent. Well, I hadn't really thought about that till that minute. And I hadn't got paid for my services either. He said, you know what, if I had this to do over, knowing how long you were going to have to do something, I ought to ask her to name you in the will. But he said, I didn't know all that then. And he said, I can't change it now. It's too late. Okay. So I made checks out to all those people. When all the bills finally were finished and everything came to a close, I sent all the checks out. When they finally all came back, I closed the account, got a zero balance, took it back, took all the boxes again, piled them on the desk. Oh, his secretary said, oh, wait a minute. I think he's going to want to see you again. Oh, no. He slid another paper across. Do you remember signing this? No. No. He says, this paper says you're going to keep all of her records for 7 years. 20 boxes. I took them all, put them in the attic of my garage, and when I had my big auction, I found the 20 boxes. I'd kept them a lot more than 7 years. I was carrying them all down the steps. And I recalled our partnership. It had been much more than my partnership, my servanthood at the shoe store. You see, she and I had become partners. Jesus said to the disciples, from now on, you're going to know what's going on in the kingdom. You're going to be given authority in the kingdom. You're going to be given the keys, as it were, to the kingdom. You're going to know everything that's going on. You're much a part of the business of God. Young people today, He's not calling you servants now. You've got a bigger job now. You are partners with God. You're partners with Christ. And the job's going to be immense, but the rewards are going to be immense as well. Verse 16 says, I have chosen you. You know, a choice makes something very special. When we pick out something, most of the time, if we're allowed to choose things, we would choose the brightest, the biggest, the most expensive, the most handsome, if you're a girl, the most beautiful, if you're a boy, the most perfect, etc., etc. But this is not how God chooses. Now, how do you choose when you go to the grocery store? If I go to the grocery store in the cans food section and there's this old bent can standing there, have you ever seen these? People drop this can and it's bent nearly in two. And instead of going ahead and buying that, they did it. They put it back up on the shelf and choose a real nice can, put it in their cart, and Mr. Dent is sitting there. And everybody after that. You know, nobody comes up and says to Mr. Dent, come to Daddy. Nobody does that. That thing's headed to the Amish bent can store. Yeah, I'll take it for 10 cents, and I'll hold it whopper jawed while somebody tries to get it open. Yeah, I'll do that if I can get it for a dime. Sometimes choices are hard, like you're the last one chosen. When I was a kid, I was very small, and my mom dressed me funny. And I had buck teeth, and I was a Nazarene preacher's boy, so I had a bunch of things going against me growing up. Back then, being a Nazarene preacher's boy was enough to get you beat up at recess. But if you got buck teeth and you're really small, you're smaller than the smallest girl in the class. I was always real tiny. When I graduated from high school, I was 5 feet, 5 inches tall, and I wore a size 5.5 shoe. I had to sit on Sears and Roebuck catalogs to drive my car. And it was a situation. Let me just tell you, it was a situation. And I was embarrassed because I was so little. The girls could even beat me up at recess. And it was a bad deal. And nobody ever wanted me on their team. So that's why I never learned to play any of the sports, because as I was growing up, I was never wanted on teams. They would choose. Back then, it was a real cruel way to do it. The teacher would take the two biggest boys, the two big galoots in the class, and then they would choose you, till everybody was all gone. And here's how it would go a lot of the time. It would be me that was left. And one would say, you want him? No. You want him? No. And I would just sit on the bench and watch everybody play. That happened over and over again. I never learned how to play volleyball, kickball, whatever. I don't know what all you play. But anyway, I never learned that because I was real little. I never got chosen. And you know, it was hard. It was hard when you are not wanted, when you're not chosen. A choice makes something special. I remember I used to think, oh, I wish they'd pick me. Wish they'd pick me. The only time they picked me was in dodgeball. Back then, in public school, which I went to all 12 grades, I didn't go to kindergarten, so that's why I don't have 13 years to proclaim. We didn't have kindergarten then. They loved being on the opposite team of me playing dodgeball. Those boys, they had this big red rubber kickball thing, and those boys would grit their teeth, arch their arm back, and I want to tell you, I don't know, I haven't looked lately, but I think I still have bruises from that. Oh, they loved to pound me. Oh, I was chosen over and over again during the pound game. I always went home knowing that I'd played the pound game. That's what I called it. Chosen. There's a choice. But when God chooses, He doesn't choose like we do. The best, the brightest, the biggest, the most expensive, the most handsome, the most beautiful, the perfect. When God chooses, He often chooses the broken, the smallest, the unwanted, the hopeless. I was in VBS in Kansas some years ago, and I'd taken a whole trailer load of stuff out for the VBS. I had two themes going on. I had a patriotic theme going on. It was a pretty large church. And I had started in the back with flags. I used to have a flag collection. It was a fantastic collection. I actually had a 13-star scattered pattern American flag. I had a flag off a battleship, 48-star, 49-star, 46-star, 50-star. The 50-star flag came about in 1959. That was the year I was born. And when Alaska and Hawaii came in, and it made the 48-star flag obsolete. But they're still to be found out there now. And so I had all these flags I brought with me, and I had them hanging from the ceiling all the way around the church, all the way up here to the center. I had flags. Valuable flags, very valuable. Then on this side, I had a Bible theme going on all the way around. So I got in a big way, like Andrew Durst did the other night, and going to give away his George Washington costume. I got in a big way one day, and I said, now the one that brings the most adults on Sunday will get any flag they want. And as soon as I said it, I thought, what? There were flags hanging there that were worth $400 or $500. One of them sold later for $2,000. Well, guess what? Sunday morning, this little dude brought 11 adults. He's a little tiny guy. And so I said, you're the winner. And everybody clapped. He just sat there. I said, you won. Everybody clapped again. He just sat there. I said, you can have any flag you want. He just sat there. Finally, I came down and I said, you won. You can have any flag you want. Which one do you want? And he just pointed like this to a vase sitting here. You see, I also had a collection of tiny flags. And there was one little bitty tiny flag there that was about the size of my second fingernail. And some little ingenious soul had taken the head of a pin, I reckon, and put 48 little tiny stars on that little linen flag. And I could have snapped the staff of it with 2 fingers. And there it was in that vase, barely sticking up. I said, you want one out of here? Never said a word. It was either this or this or this. So I thought, well, surely it'll be this biggest one. I said, well, why don't you come and pick? To my surprise and delight, he chose that little tiny flag this big, and he held it up. And the crowd went crazy. And afterwards, I felt bad, really. At first, I felt relieved he hadn't picked that good one. And I went to his mother and I said, really, I feel bad about this. And I was willing to let any of them go because I felt bad about it. Oh, she said, Brother Mitchell, he's so happy. See, there was something I didn't know. He had a collection of little tiny things. He didn't like normal sized toys. He wanted any toy he got to fit in a fishing tackle box. You know, the kind that unfold? She said he's got several of those. He don't want any toy unless it'll fasten up in that. And she said, Brother Mitchell, from the minute you got here, he's had his eye on that little flag. Then I knew why God had chosen me. I was a nobody from nowhere. Lived on a little farm in Johnson County, Indiana. Probably would never have got out of the county had not Jesus chosen me. Jesus chose me. And here I am. And I sat on a platform there and I said, Lord, what am I doing here? What am I doing here on my home district? My very first church, they had, the DS had already promised this church to another man. It was a little church that had been split several times, and They had 6 people, and the district was going to subsidize the salary for a year to try to get this church back on its feet again. And they were going to pay a full-time salary for a year. But when they found out I was going, the Home Mission Board withdrew their offer. And I was going to go alone and with nothing because they didn't have any confidence in me. You see, I was a nobody. But I went anyway, and God helped me. And I think it kind of shocked some of them. The first year we broke the Easter offering record. My first Easter, we had 140 some in Easter service. Our first April, we averaged 72. We started a bus ministry. God gloriously helped us there in spite of what everybody thought. I'm just telling you today, kids, you may feel like you're not much of nothing. But on the authority of personal experience and the Word of God, I can tell you that God has chosen you. You can be something for God. You can lead a youth group. You can drive a bus. You can be a bus helper. You can be a bus captain. You can preach. You can go to the mission field. You can work in a college. You can go to college. You can graduate with a degree. You can do lots of things because when Jesus chooses you, you are a choice that's been made by the greatest power in the world. God chose. God ordained. You know, we think of ordination, we think of a time that we lay hands on preachers and give them a certificate. After that, we call them elders in the church and so on. But this is a different thing too. This is also an ordination. Not only have you been chosen, but everyone that's chosen is ordained. In other words, that means set apart. You are set apart from this world. You are set apart from others your same age and others in your same school. You've been set apart by God. You've been chosen. You've been ordained. You've been commissioned, according to verse 16, that ye should go. That you should go. God has a job for you. God has a job for you. I remember one day I got off the school bus feeling pretty good about myself. I lived on a farm, and I thought, you know what? There's not a lot we're going to have to do on the farm this summer. Oh, yeah, there's some stuff. We do. We got to bale hay. We got to walk the beans. We got to do that. We got to cultivate the corn. There's not that much to do. Oh, yeah, we got to do this. But when I got home, my dad said, I got a present for you. I said, okay. He said, it's out in the barn. Go out and see it. I got out there. There stands a 35-gallon drum of white paint and a big brush on top, a couple gallon of paint thinner, that old-fashioned oil paint that smells so bad, a couple of empty buckets. Dad said, you're going to paint all the fences on the farm this summer. Our barn lot and everything was just whiteboard fence. I think 3 or 4 boards. And I was going to paint inside and out. So, you know what? I've been chosen. I've been commissioned, set apart. And my command was go. And I started painting the fence. And I want to tell you, it was a hot job. But you know, I don't remember really complaining much about it, because my greatest desire as growing up as a kid was to have my dad think well of me and congratulate me. I really needed my dad's approval in those days a lot. And I think a lot of boys need that. And I did. I wanted my dad to approve of me. And I was a hard worker. And even though I was little, I could paint. I might have to stand on a milk can, but I could paint. And so I painted. I painted all summer. And I was so sunburnt. I was so sunburnt when I got it all done. But when I got done, my dad says, he says, you've done a great job. He says, I think I'm going to give you my old Chevy pickup. And I said, oh, good. Oh, I was so happy. We called her Nellie Bell. That don't mean nothing to you now. But to anybody that knows anything about Dale Evans and Roy Rogers, you would know about it. because Nellie Bell was their blue Jeep. Dad named this old blue truck Nellie Bell. And oh, I was so happy, a 54 Chevy. And I waxed it all up. I was so happy. I didn't know I was going to get a reward. I didn't know I was going to get a reward, but I did. And I learned to drive. It was 3 on the tree. I learned to drive the old Chevy pickup. I wish I still had it. I had a reward. The Bible says there should be results in your life, according to verse 16. Jesus wants us to bear much fruit. We're not supposed to just take in, but we're supposed to gain something for the kingdom. What can you gain? Who could you gain for the kingdom? All of you should have your eye on somebody that you can get to the kingdom of God. Friends that live down the street, people that you know, family members. Maybe there's someone in your youth group that just kind of stands off to the back, just kind of comes around, but they've never really made a start for God. Why don't you befriend them? Why don't you get next to them and purpose in your heart that you're going to lead them to God? Bear fruit. Oh, you have people in your family. You have neighbors that you can win to God. You can go over and start doing things for them. You can go over and rake their leaves. Some of you are like deer in the headlights when I said work. You can rake their leaves. You can mow their yard sometime. You can go over and ask you to help in their flower beds. You can do things. It took me 7 years to get one lady to God by doing that. I worked myself to death at her place for 7 years. But on the 7th year, she asked me to pray that Jesus would come into her heart. 7 years it took me to get her to God. But oh, it's worth it all. Thank God. Oh, if you can get somebody to God, it's going to be worth everything, kids. Let me tell you, it's the greatest opportunity you've got is to be fruitful in Christ and to know that in the checkbook of heaven, your name is on the checks. And you know anything about checks. Mr. Loper III, you need a checkbook. Come to my house and I'll teach you how to do it. It's a lot of fun writing checks. I love writing checks. I learned how to do it in 10th grade. We had a class on writing checks and keeping a checkbook balance. And I've never balanced a checkbook since I got out of the class. But I learned how to write checks. I want to tell you something. It's nice to have the checkbook of heaven in your pocket and you know that you're a joint heir. Let me tell you, when you're a joint heir, it helps you get busier, doesn't it? You know, if you're off on your own, you're not getting, nothing's coming to you out of this deal. But when you're a joint heir, you're interested in the bottom line. You want to get somebody to God. Let me tell you, kids, you can get somebody to God. You can be a children's worker. You want to do something rewarding? Even you big boys, I just tell you one thing. The most rewarding thing I've ever done in my entire ministry, barring none, is I became a children's worker, strictly out of necessity. I was at a place, we didn't have anybody to do VBS, and the church said, well, Brother Mitchell, why don't you do it? Why don't I do it? Impossible. But I thought, well, maybe I could. I remember the story, Barney and the Barrel. You remember that? You haven't lived yet. It was in a little booklet shaped like a barrel. And I was in kids camp on the Iowa district, the Church of Nazarene, and that woman made Barney and the Barrel last an entire week. She cried. She told about Barney's life at home. Oh, it was so sad. We all cried. His dad was a drunkard. He had to live in a barrel. It was a terrible thing. Oh, the last night of the camp, she said, oh, you boys and girls. She said, I want you to come and promise Jesus that you'll never touch liquor. So we all just ran to the altar. Oh, boy. I remember making that pledge. I didn't buy liquor until I was 42. I was in a meeting. I went to an auction. Bought a toolbox. Sight unseen. I get back to the house where I'm staying. I thought, well, I'm going to check my toolbox out, see what I got. In the bottom of the toolbox is a can of Falstaff beer. And I thought, oh no, I've just bought a beer. What am I going to do with this? I'll just leave it in here. And what if somebody sees my toolbox and wants to borrow a tool? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll open it up, dump it out, put the can in the neighbor's trash can. So that was the plan, okay? But I never opened a beer before. This was back when you put your finger in and popped the top. It didn't just stay on there. It popped. So, and I didn't know what happened to beer when it rolled back and forth in a hot toolbox. And I opened that, and it shot out right into my mouth, my nose, my hair. I was totally covered in beer, and it didn't stop till it was all out of there. And it happened that quick. And I'm standing there with an empty can. And I want to tell you kids something. You're not missing anything about beer, because it tastes like garbage smells. That's all I can say. Oh, it was awful. It was an awful ordeal. Oh, but I promised that lady I'd never drink. I didn't drink. I swallowed some, but I didn't. Later I said, Lord, did I break my vow? I don't think so. And you know, when I did my first VBS, I hunted everywhere for Barney and the Barrel. Oh, I found it. I thought, oh, this is great. This will last all week. I looked at Barney and the Barrel and said, Barney, you're not cutting it. I think I could make Barney last a week now, but then I couldn't. But oh, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Big boys, I want to tell you, there's a lot of boys that would come to VBS if they had a man director. There's a lot of boys that would come to Sunday school if they had a boy teacher. There's just something about it. There's something about boys like to resonate with guys. And if you'll just learn how to do some stuff, and you may not be able to tell the stories, but if you'll just get up and lead the singing, and you'll get up and do some things, you can influence other boys to God. I wish a lot of you guys would get involved in children's ministry. It's one of the greatest things I've ever done. Sometimes there at Greenfield, when I held the ICHA Kids Camp 27 years, I was a speaker 27 straight years. And I'd get done preaching. I'd preach 3 times a day to those kids. And when I'd get done preaching, they'd just come to the altar, gather up around me, push up against me. And I thought, oh God, I want to live the kind of life that these kids will never be disappointed in me. You should go and bear much fruit, lasting results. They should be fruits that would remain. You're going to have answers to prayer. Jesus said, I want you to love one another. You know, there's some knotheads in the church. This may be a stretch for some of you. And then Jesus says in verse 19, I've chosen you out of the world. Kids, we've been called to be separate from this world. Jesus said, if the world hates you, know this, it hated me first. You will be hated of this world. We're seeing this rhetoric being turned up all the time on the church, aren't we? We're seeing rhetoric being turned up on the church. The heat's on us right now. The winds were blowing our direction for a little while, but I think the winds have changed again. I just want to say this to you today. You've been chosen out of the world. Don't you dare be a worldly teenager. Don't you dare try to be as worldly as you can and still serve God. You've been called and you've been set apart. You've been chosen. God wants you to be fruitful. You are not of this world. Don't get your mind on the things of this world. You've got something to do for Jesus. Let's stand together. Okay, John, are you in charge of the rousting music that's going to close this service? All right, give us some exit music, shake hands and be friendly, and tell your neighbor, you've been chosen. Go. Go away.